Idelalisib was approved by the FDA on the basis of a phase 2 clinical trial. The trial was originally called CAL 10109 and then GS 10109. And in that clinical trial, a group of physicians around the country treated people with rituximab and alkylator refractory follicular lymphoma. So in other words, we treated a group of patients that were probably more resistant to therapy than this patient, where they had to have relapsed within 6 months of rituximab and within 6 months of receiving an alkylator. And in that patient population, over 50% of people responded, and they had a median PFS of close to a year. I think it was about 11 months. So in a group of people that really didn't have a lot of other great treatment options, there was some there was promising activity. And importantly, most of the people treated on that clinical trial felt a lot better than they had during their prior therapies. Not only that, but they responded significantly better to idelalisib than they had to their last prior therapy. So it was a good option. That said, idelalisib does have some drawbacks, well known from the package insert in particular, which I recommend if anybody's using idelalisib, it's worthwhile to review that. These include liver enzyme abnormalities. It's important to monitor the liver enzymes when we're starting our idelalisib. And again, then there are some autoimmune disorders that start to become more common in people on idelalisib for longer periods of time. These can include pneumonitis and colitis specifically, which is, I think, the case in this patient. So somewhere around 15 to 20% of people receiving idelalisib may develop an autoimmune colitis based on clinical trials. We don't know if that number would go up if people were on it for a longer period of time, but we may learn that with some time. We don't really know how to predict who's likely to experience that. The autoimmune colitis is clearly different than the sort of drug-induced colitis that people experience early on, or drug-induced diarrhea, which is just a simple diarrhea that goes away. It might happen when we start idelalisib and then it goes away within the first month or two. The autoimmune colitis is usually one that is delayed in terms of onset and can become pretty significant. So we monitor for it, and if we see it or if we see something that we're suspicious of, the guidelines are, if the diarrhea is relatively mild, to just monitor it and consider a dose reduction. My bias in this case, since it was becoming a little bit more significant and having an impact on her quality of life, is just to hold it and wait for it to resolve. In summary, I think idelalisib is a reasonable choice in this situation because it sort of accomplishes what the goals were in this case. In other words, this was a woman who was relatively young but had multiple prior therapies and was interested still in maintaining a reasonable quality of life. Idelalisib is oral therapy, so it's easy to do. It requires some blood monitoring and some clinical monitoring after that, but it doesn't require a lot of intravenous infusions, doesn't cause hair loss. Relatively easy to administer, easy to take, and as long as we're cognizant of the potential side effects and looking for them and being ready to act on them, it's something that can be done relatively easily.